Welcome back to the Piping Pastor. Theology Talks. Today we'll be getting into the biblical response to training the next generation. Well, on this rather warm and toasty Sunday afternoon in El Paso, I am enjoying some Mylan tobacco in my Curtis Meerschaum church warden here. And church warden the Meerschaum is coloring up very nicely. A couple of things that I do to try to make the coloration go evenly, because it can be very easy with a meerschaum to burn through them, for them to color in, especially down here in the shank and the stummel, and then be lighter everywhere else, and it takes some time to get them to color evenly, and it can be a bit of a bother. So what I do is I don't smoke all the way down to the bottom. That is to say, I don't smoke it all till it's completely gone ash. When I smoke in the meerschaum, I smoke down to just the last wee little bit, and I leave some unburnt tobacco in the bottom, so I don't get the bottom all burned out. And then additionally, when I clean it, when I ream it out, I ream it in such a way that the darker areas I leave a little bit more carbon cake on, and the areas that are lighter I clear them out, so that more of the coloration comes through in the lighter areas. So as a result, it's not perfect, but it is getting there. It's staying rather even. And I'm not one of those people who waxes it on a regular basis. That's an intermittent thing for me. And I use the yellow beeswax, not the white beeswax. The yellow beeswax is, in point of fact, it's a better wax. The white is used so that the new meerschaums have that pristine white color that a lot of people gravitate towards. But it's not as good a wax to use. But again, I don't spend days on end waxing this meerschaum. But in it, I am smoking the Balkan mixture by Mylan. I mentioned I got some of the Joe's blend in bulk because I really like it, and then I thought I'd try out the Centenary and the Balkan. Centenary was okay. Probably wouldn't get it again. It was okay. Didn't really ring my bell. The Balkan's really nice, but again, I probably won't order it again. When it comes to the purchase of tobacco, I try to manage what it is that I have. Oftentimes we see these massive sellers with people like Beans and Piper Dave and so forth, and it's great to have a cellar that big. You can age a bunch of stuff, and you can have tobaccos that get discontinued. Um, I have a bit of a different philosophy on that. Um, my thought is, I'm going to have the tobacco that I'm going to use. I'm going to have the tobacco that I'm going to smoke, and I have two or three things that I cellar, but for the most part, I buy the tobacco that I want to enjoy. Having, I really like Seattle Pike Clum's bourbon barrel aged plum pudding, my favorite tobacco. So I usually have two or three tins of that. I won't go through 2 or 3 tins, in short order. Like right now I have 2 unopened tins, and I don't have any jarred up just now. But so I can make sure that I always have that around if I want it. But I see these massive sellers, and I always think, for a new pipe smoker coming in, they may think, oh my gosh, I'm gonna have to spend $10,000 to do this hobby right, and you really don't. If you want to, and you want to have a bunch on hand, give away as gifts or so on and so forth, and fine, knock yourself out. But the old school pipe smokers, the codgers, they'd have like one blend, maybe two, one pipe, maybe two. So this hobby's about enjoying yourself and trying new stuff, sure. But if something isn't, you're like, wow, that's great. Don't buy like 8 tins of it just because you think it's okay, right? I've recently been thinking about Fusiliers Ration again. I haven't had that for a long time, and I know I really, really enjoyed it. But when I look at my cellar right now, and I have 22 jars of tobacco in there right now, and it's going to take me a hot minute to get through those. So before I get any Fusiliers rations, I'm going to go through at least 2 or 3 of those jars before I buy anything new. And then I can keep it. That's how my rotation kind of works. So you don't need to have 1,000 jars on your shelf. If you want to, sure, knock yourself out. As I said, I know there's a lot of people who wish they would have been cellaring, Frogmorton before the great end. So there is that. But at the end of the day, tobaccos are going to come and go. You're going to like some that they're going to stop making, or they're going to make differently, and it's going to go away. But you know what? There's 10,000 other options out there. So find something else you like. Another tip, because sometimes we don't get into the tobacco smoking portion of these pipe videos. I know a lot of people don't like to use Zippos because they think it has the fluid taste, which usually burns off after you fill it after the first couple lights. But then also the flame is bigger and it's not as directed and pointed as those little butane ladders that you can get with the notched or the hooked in, or the really expensive Japanese models and so on and so forth. And but you can get the same kind of flame on a Zippo by just manipulating the wick. So if you twist and bend the wick to the left or to the right, then you can have the flame come straight out and straight down through the pipe side, through the pipe insert, so that you can get straight into the center of the pipe, kind of a light. And it's just as easy to control as one of those butane ladders. So anyway, on to the video content. I'm reading, one of the books I'm reading right now is a book about a army chaplain. He served in World War II and Korea. His name was Emil Kapaun, or Kapaun, Kapaun. It's a Bavarian name. And he's a Catholic priest, was a Catholic priest. He was captured by the North Koreans. He was a prisoner of war, tortured, and then eventually died in a prison camp. He was posthumously awarded the Medal of Honor, and currently the Diocese of Wichita, which is where he was from, is working to get him sainted. For all the work he did in the wars and so on and so forth, and the miracle healings and some other things that through his career. So I'm reading a book about him right now. And in this book, it speaks a great deal about his personal character and how his personal character carried him through both those wars and allowed him to keep ministering to soldiers in really difficult circumstances. And he was a pipe smoker. One of the things that was most noted about him was he was never without his pipe. There's a great picture of him. You can probably Google it. If you Google Emil Kapaun pipe, you probably get a lot of pictures because he was never without his pipe. But there's a really good one where he's holding it up, kind of smiling like this, and it's like broken off, and there's like some tape around the edge. And it looks like that because the pipe was shot out of his mouth by a sniper. So a sniper is drawing a bead on him and misses and just shoots his pipe out of his mouth. And there's a great story in the book where he's ministering to a soldier in a foxhole and he breaks his pipe out and starts to light his pipe. The soldier's like, why is your pipe so short? He's like, oh, sniper shot it out of my mouth. So anyway, he just moves on. In any case, in the book they talk a great deal about how his character was developed through his childhood, through his raising, the way his parents raised him on the farm as a farm worker, and and all the lessons he learned in that work ethic and dedication to family and God. He learned on his parents' farm in Kansas. And I was thinking about that when I was watching one of Polypore Piper's most recent videos. I'm still trying to get caught up on everyone's old videos. If you haven't seen Polly Piper's videos, you should check them out. She does. It's primarily lunting. She takes a lot of walks in the woods and talks about nature and with her dog and pipe smoking and pipes and tobaccos and so forth. But she was talking about the fact that she's been hearing a lot lately, especially about within the YTPC, about people complaining about the younger generation. Not just not being impressed by them. Bad work ethic or overly sensitive. Snowflake would be the term I guess we would use here in the States. And it put me in mind of a quote about someone who once upon a time was making the exact same assertion, saying that younger people today have no respect. They don't stand when their teachers enter the room. They're not intellectually curious. They're not hard workers. They're just kind of layabouts, right? And that quote was from Plato. So this whole thing about the older generation criticizing the younger generation has been going on for millennia, right? It's nothing new. Something everyone does. Every generation complains about the one after it, and generally about the one before it. But when we think about the complaints that are leveled against the younger generation, and the whole participation trophy culture, and and just this thing about them not being go-getters and so on and so forth, you got to think about why that is. Because the training they received. So at the end of the day, whose responsibility is it? If you want to complain about participation trophy culture, you have to ask yourself, who gave the participation trophies, right? Now, the Bible says, train up a child in the way they should go. When they're old, they will not depart from it. In point of fact, the Bible mentions training or teaching younger people 47 times. It's kind of an important aspect of the Bible. When the Israelites finally moved into the Promised Land, the very next generation started wandering away from God because they weren't trained and taught by their elders. These elders, their parents, their grandparents, the people who had actually seen the miracles of God in the desert, didn't train it to the next generation. And one generation later, from Joshua and Caleb and and fighting all these battles and claiming the land, the very next generation starts wandering away from God because there was no training there. There was no teaching. Now, a common response to this is, well, I train my kids, or I don't have any kids, so what do? We do have a responsibility to our own families, right? Just like Trucking Pepper Bob always says, look after your families because you need to. That is a primary and key and first responsibility. But we have a responsibility to society at large as well. That means, yes, you can train your own children. You should train your own children. You should teach your own children. You should pour into your own children. But beyond that, there's other kids out there. There's kids out there who don't have adults who are willing to or able to train them or teach them or pour into them. It doesn't say anywhere that this training thing is easy. It doesn't say, train up a child in the way they should go if you have time for it. Train up a child in the way they should go after you get your task list accomplished. Train up a child in the way they should go after you build your own wealth. Train up a child the way you should go if it's your child. It doesn't say any of that. We have a generational responsibility. We have a responsibility as citizens of the world, right, to help train other children. So volunteer at a youth center. Teach Sunday school at your church or whatever your faith tradition is. It doesn't really make any difference. Spend some time with young people. And yeah, it takes time. It's difficult. It can be frustrating. It is a thankless job. They won't even acknowledge the effort you're pouring into them until maybe 10, 15, 20 years later, right? But if you want to make some kind of a change, if you want to see some kind of a change in the generation after you, complaining is not going to do it, right? That's like complaining about your political leaders and never voting, right? Spend the time. Take the time. Make the effort. You may have to check some of your own goals. You're like, I really want to do this, or I really want to get this done. But where should my focus be? Should it be just on feathering my own nest or trying to improve the world? You know that story about the kid on the beach with the starfish, right? Kid's walking on the beach and there's 1,000 starfish and they're all dying on the sand. He's picking one up and throwing it in, picking one up and throwing it in. Somebody walks by and says, "Why are you doing this? You can't possibly make a difference to these thousands of starfish." And the kid picks one up and throws it back in and goes, "Well, it made a difference to that one." That's how it starts. But it takes the effort. It takes more effort than complaining. Maybe that's why people don't do it. Well, that is it for me for this time. Perhaps appropriately, I'll be leaving after this video and going to do this very same thing. So I'm going to be teaching some classes in Kenjutsu and offering some biblical perspectives on that for some kids here locally. So, and again, probably won't get any thanks for this at all. But who knows? 20 years from now, one of those kids may grab somebody else and teach them something I'm teaching them today. But I'd rather do that than complain. So, in any case, hope you have a lovely week. As always, happy reading.